and see people after the
Now
snow and the ice.
We're starting to thaw out there. I may even walk outside today. It's
That
50.
sounds good.
That's an acceptable temperature, and I'd like to get some sun.
I took the dog out, not for a walk, but went into an open field and threw his toy and let him run for a while. He needed exercise too.
Well, I live in an area where I can walk on the street.
It's clear.
And the streets are clear.
Yeah, but you better be careful
Well,
anyway. There's some slick spots.
I'm not gonna go till the middle of the afternoon most of the time, snow, no. And by the middle of the week, we won't see
What is
it.
he doing?
I've been walking at the mall.
Mhm.
There's a crowd there.
Another place to walk.
All right, friends. I hope everyone has had a wonderful, oh, I need to just share so that anyone who's joining us online will know.
Don't show a picture.
Well, right now we're showing the screen mostly, and the little pictures of us are only up in the corners. So it's wonderful to be with everybody again. Yes, it's been a crazy couple weeks. It's going to be a crazy couple more weeks. Hopefully there'll be time to slow down. Maybe in May we'll get there. We're going to start again in the Talmud. We're on Berachot, Daf 11, Amud Aleph. And we're going to start with the sages talking about Beit Hillel. And how do we say the Shema? I know we're talking about the Shema a lot. We're still in Berachot. If we move to another tractate, you'll see a very different conversation. So the sages taught in a Baraita that Beit Hillel say, one may recite Shema in any situation. Standing and reciting, sitting and reciting, reclining and reciting. As long as you recite and you recline. Here in the building this morning, we want to close that up. So you can do any of it: standing, sitting, reclining, walking and reciting, and even working and reciting. Beit Hillel says you can recite any way you want.
Only if it's Passover.
And in the Tosefta, an incident is related where two Tanaim, those two Tanaim are Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who were both disciples of Beit Hillel, were reclining at a meal in one place together with their students, and Rabbi Yishmael was reclined, as was the customary dining position of the time. Remember, in the time of the Romans, a lot of people ate on beds, like chaise lounge, you know. So that's what they were doing. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was upright. When the time to recite the evening Shema arrived, Rabbi Elazar reclined to recite Shema in accordance with the opinion of Beit Shammai, while Rabbi Yishmael sat upright to recite Shema. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah appeared to take offense and said to Rabbi Yishmael, what did Yishmael do? Yishmael was already laying down. The other guy was sitting up. He lays down like that guy's laying down, and that guy sits up. And he goes, what the heck? Right? He's not that happy. He says to Rabbi Yishmael, Yishmael, Achi, my brother, I will tell you a parable to which this is similar. You know it's a good friendship when somebody stops you and says, hold on, friend, let me tell you a story. So he says, it is comparable to a situation, Nimshal, where one to whom people say as a compliment, your beard is full and suits you. So even then, beards were a feature of compliment. That man says to them, may it be against those who shave and destroy their beards, i.e. the only reason I grow my beard is to irritate those who cut their own. You are the same. As long as I am upright, you are reclined. And now when I am reclined, lauding your conduct and emulating you, you sat upright as if to demonstrate that whatever I do, you do the opposite. He's offering rebuke. as we were just talking about.
A psychiatrist might say, why do you personally?
Yes, you're right. It's interesting. You're taking this very personally that I sat up when you laid down. Rabbi Ishmael said to him, is that what he said to him? Probably not.
Yeah.
So what's his response to this wonderful story? Rabbi Ishmael said to him, I acted in accordance with the opinion of Beit Hillel, according to whom one may recite Shema in any position, while you acted in accordance with the opinion of Beit Shammai. I am the one who acted in accordance with the halacha. And furthermore, I was concerned lest the students see your conduct and establish the halacha for generations accordingly. It was therefore necessary for me to demonstrate that there's no obligation to do so, right? So this guy says, it seems to be a misunderstanding. Does it not? Now we know it's said that he laid down in accordance with Shammai, because remember, if you remember from previous classes, Shammai said that the morning Shema was said standing up and the evening Shema was said lying down. And this was done. So this guy was already laying down because he was on his eating. The other guy comes and says, I'm going to lay down because you're laying down and we're going to say the Shema. And maybe Ishmael was worried. It seems this is his worry he's sharing. He's worried about what? What's his ultimate worry?
That people will adopt Shemais.
That the right. I was concerned lest the students see your conduct and establish the halacha for generations. Halacha ledorot. Ask the Haredim how important halacha ledorot is.
I spent a career trying to persuade people.
Yeah.
I kind of take issue with the way that they
Interesting.
attempt to persuade. I think persuading by citing other people doesn't work real very well. It wouldn't work for me if I was speaking to a jury, but they'd ignore,
And what here is what
this person says or what this person does. If you create your own credibility, you're much more persuasive.
the rabbis believe that you can only have credibility by standing on the shoulders of those who came before you.
Yeah.
That's why citation is so important in Jewish jurisprudence, because we very much believe that the former generations were more in touch with revelation. So the rabbis of then are more authoritative than the rabbis of now. So if you quote Hillel, you're quoting, it's great, it's wonderful. By the way, I would say the rabbis don't think that quoting something alone makes something proven. But they do hold that these are very important teachings. So there's a tension there. Are you upset with Yishmael? Sure.
Personal experience.
I think you're right.
On how you persuade or convince.
I think you're probably right. I think there are more convincing ways than just appeal to authority. This guy said it, therefore it's true, is not the most appealing form of argumentation. I agree with you. Yeah.
All respect, Rabbi Ishmael, I think there's a fault in your logic. Hillel says you can say it in any position. So Rabbi, who's it? The other one.
Yeah.
By lying down, he's not necessarily following.
That's kind of what that seems to be Elazar ben Azariah's bugaboo, right? That seems to be what he's upset about. Because he's like, I don't think I was when it says here, Yeah, if you're reading it just in the Aramaic, it says Rabbi Elazar reclined while Rabbi Yishmael sat upright. It doesn't appear there's a reason. Yeah. It doesn't appear there's a reason, even in the commentary I'm reading, for why they chose to say he was doing it because of why Steinsaltz thinks it's because he was doing it like Beit Shammai. But the problem here is that isn't his real problem isn't anything to do. Yishmael's problem isn't anything to do with Beit Shammai specifically. It has to do with establishing the right practice. If they're going to do something with their students, in this case, Beit Hillel says you can do it in any position. So Yishmael was just saying, I was trying to make sure, if I was laying down and you were sitting up, that was cool with me. But when you laid down, you made it look like we should all lay down. And that's what Beit Shammai says. And that's not what we're about. And that's not what we're still, we're looking back on it and saying, oh yeah, Beit Hillel is who the halacha always follows Beit Hillel. But was that a foregone conclusion? It's one of those things where these people don't believe it is. They clearly don't. Rabbi Ishmael clearly thinks that he needs to move himself so that the students see that there's more than one way of doing Jewish, which, as a Reform rabbi, I love. So Beit Hillel says there are 5 different ways we can do this. If we all do it the same way, we're saying that it's better to do it just this way. We're giving it over to Beit Shammai. He couldn't have that. He didn't want to lose this battle within their own school because of, this guy came over and laid down or something, like to have such a serious consequence from an unserious action is unacceptable to Rabbi Ishmael.
True, but when I read Leviticus, there's an awful lot of rules, raising this and doing this, and they're trying to establish a non-sacrificial Judaism. So if you can't do it any which way when you're doing sacrificial.
That's very true.
And so they're busy trying to say, hey, it has to be this way because we are substituting this for sacrificial.
The problem we're getting into here, and this is again why I brought in reform into this conversation, is that it's not that you can do it any way you want. It's not one way, and it's not 1,000 ways, but it could be 10. Do you see what I mean? What I'm trying to say, reform isn't about there's 1,000 ways, but we're not about there's only one halacha.
The problem is and you brought it up.
Yeah.
Explained it very well, that the source has been blurred over time. And if the source is not clear, how do you get people to follow what you're saying?
Well, first you have to make an interpretation that makes sense. It has to follow reason, so that people will listen to you, which is exactly what they're doing here, by the way.
So do you do it by saying the ancient rabbis say this, or you do it because this?
You make an argument, a real argument, not just based on that, but it includes what the ancient rabbis say. So what you do is you write a teshuvah in modern parlance. That's not good. Okay. This is a teshuvah. Uh-oh. Well, it's a big spicy one, but this is a teshuvah. May a Jew married to a non-Jew become a rabbi? The answer at this one was no, but they since then they've decided to do stuff. Wait, when did this come out?
That was just a TV show.
Yeah. So here someone proposes a question, and in the answer, they do a lot of things. They go over the history of a subject. They go over the traditional answers to this question in halacha. The halacha goes so far as to declare that such unions are not recognized marriages at all. Ein kedushin tofsin. So this is a reform. This is the reform body of rabbis who's writing this teshuva. They appeal to halacha. They go over various things about the history of our movement, about why we might encourage these things, why we might change rules. Right. And then they make an argument here, right? You're talking about argument, but they make an argument. They say that someone might want to do it anyway, and here's an argument as to why this is a bad idea. They make a real argument. They say this is what it means for a Jew to marry someone. This is what it means to be a leader in the Jewish community. Are they right? That's for you to decide. But just like how you would make an argument in a legal case, you would have to talk about the history and the precedents. I assume. I don't know what kind of law you practiced. You would have. I know what my dad did as a lawyer, somewhat. And you would formulate an argument based on the facts and based on what might work, and you'd have to convince people. And hopefully everything would line up in a way that was logical, and people would say, yeah, that makes sense. In this case, what Rabbi Ishmael did was really jerky. He should have stopped and said, hey, Rabbi Elazar, you are laying down. We are members of the school of Beit Hillel. Let's make sure we're modeling, right? Pedagogy. They didn't know the word pedagogy. It was Greek, but they didn't know it. How do you teach? They did a bad job here. And the one guy went and laid down and he didn't think about it. Ishmael was thinking about it, but he handled it like a jerk. And so, but his reasoning was good. He's like, we don't want to teach them the wrong thing. We want to teach them the right thing. And we do want to teach, Reform Judaism wants to teach the right thing too. We're just more expansive in our interpretation of what the right thing can be. That doesn't mean it's an infinite expanse. That doesn't mean everything universally can be Jewish. No, it doesn't. But it does mean that that there's room for interpretation and variety and such.
People obviously want to do the right thing.
Oh yeah, lots of people say they want to do the right thing.
What reason?
To make God happy, generally. In Judaism, you want to do it so you can be in a closer relationship with God. So that you can do what God wants, and therefore you will have a good life if you do what God wants. I don't know. I've only lived the life I've lived, so it's really hard for me to sometimes, as a rabbi, to express these things beyond my understanding of them. For me, I see the benefit in living a life according to mitzvot. I see a very clear benefit. I have clarity of mind. I'm never worried about X, Y, or Z because I don't get into trouble. I mean, life is just easier when you do things the right way. And I'd rather have an easier life than a harder life. But I get some people would rather, I mean, there are different things that push people to different choices. Maybe. We'll see. They got a lot of choices to make still.
They got a lot of time too.
Yeah. You guys are welcome to talk too. You don't have to, you're not on display. Okay, so this is an important lesson, and he doesn't want Elazar's conduct, what he's doing, to establish the halacha, because people will cite back to it. They'll say, "Remember that story of Elazar and Yishmael? They were both rabbis in the school of Beit Hillel, but they agreed that Shammai was right." And that might be what was taught by their students. So they didn't want that. And the Gemara, it has a something stuck up for the Gemara here. The Gemara goes, okay, what when it says, and furthermore, velo od ela shema yiru hatalmidim. So when it says, and furthermore, I was concerned lest the students see your conduct. Excuse me. The Gemara asks, what's the meaning of velo od? And furthermore, why was it necessary for Rabbi Yishmael to add additional justification for his actions when the reason that he acted in accordance with the opinion of Beit Hillel was sufficient? Right? If he had said, Rabbi Yishmael said to him, Ani asiti kidivrei Beit Hillel. The Gemara says, why wasn't that sufficient? He explained the halacha. Didn't I tell you guys before? Oh, you just taught it. Just said it. That was it. He said the halacha. Why wasn't that enough? The Gemara answers. Does anyone have something they want to say?
I understand that they're trying to establish, I guess, a single halacha. It's to be done this way, but it almost makes Beit Shammai an apostate. We certainly don't want to do like Beit Shammai says. In fact, the way that both of them do it is respectful, is trying to serve God, but Beit Hillel is trying to include more people.
I mean, it's both of those things, right? It could be either, depending on your perspective. We tend to like Beit Hillel because Beit Hillel is a more liberal thinker. I mean, small L liberal, than Shammai is. And Shammai is not an apostate. Shammai and Hillel's houses intermarried and ate at each other's tables. So even if they didn't hold exactly the same way, they didn't see them as against Judaism. There's a difference. Koifer, I keep wanting to say apikorsim too. Heretics are against Judaism, which nobody, I mean, there are so few real Jewish heretics. You know what I mean?
I do, but it's as if Rabbi Yishmael is saying here, God forbid we should follow Beit Shammai.
But I don't see that as calling him I don't see that as putting him outside the realm. If somebody came in tomorrow or on Friday night and said, Rabbi, I'm enhancing the Judaism of your synagogue. And I said, really? That's fascinating. How do you plan to do so? And they said, well, I took this curtain and I put it up the middle of your sanctuary so that now the men can sit on one side and the women can sit on the other. I would say, that's a very valid Jewish choice for you to make somewhere else, but not here, not in my house. Not in my house is all he was saying. He wasn't saying it's not Jewish. He's just saying, not in my house. We do it Beit Hillel's way here. Which I think is fair. I think it's okay for different Jews to say we do things differently in our own homes. And I think Davka, it is important we not see each other as heretics for doing so. But thank you. That's an important point. So the Gemara answers, it was necessary for him to add the reason of the halacha for Ledorot, as if you were to say, don't say this, if you were to say, Beit Hillel also hold that one is permitted to recite Shema while reclining, and Rabbi Yishmael could have remained reclining even in accordance with the opinion of Beit Hillel. This only applies when one had been reclining originally, in which case it is like any other position. However, here, since he had been upright and now he is reclined, the students will say, I kind of said this before, but conclude from this, Shema mina, Kiveit Shammai svira lahu. Conclude from this that they hold in accordance with the opinion of Beit Shammai. Chas v'shalom. Heaven forbid. Right? And again, that's the thing. But we don't want that because we're not Beit Shammai. Due to the concern that the students might see an established halacha l'dorot, or the established halacha for the generations, In accordance with the opinion of Beit Shammai, it was necessary for Rabbi Yishmael to sit upright. And they have a lot more with this. But I think that's important. And I actually think he shouldn't have even said the first part about Beit Hillel. The other guy was also a rabbi in the school of Beit Hillel. Maybe he was the dumbest rabbi there. I don't know. There are a couple of rabbis in the Talmud who are basically only there for the other rabbis to poke fun at them. There's a couple of them where they're like, hey, get a load of this guy, rabbi. But like, it doesn't happen often. I'm not sure this is one of those guys, but in this case, it's very interesting. Anyway, we can move on to this next bit. Tanu Rav Yechezkel. So Rav Yechezkel taught. I love how they go ahead and do Rav Yechezkel, but I guess they did Yehuda too, so it's fine. So it could be Rabbi Ezekiel, but it's fine. Rabbi Yechezkel taught, one who acted in accordance with the opinion of Beit Shammai has acted appropriately and is not in violation of the halacha. One who has acted in accordance with the opinion of Beit Hillel acted appropriately as well. According to this opinion, Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai agree that one who acted in accordance with the opinion of the other fulfilled his obligation. Although the halacha was ruled in accordance with the opinion of Beit Hillel, Beit Hillel would agree that one who acted in accordance with the opinion of Beit Shammai fulfilled his obligation. So that's the answer there to the Gemara is coming in and saying, it's not that they thought they were apostates. It's not that they thought they were not Jews. They disagreed. And by the way, this is how I have great relationships. One of my best friends since moving to Kansas is the rabbi of the Orthodox Synagogue, Kehillat Israel in Kansas City, in Overland Park. And sometimes we talk about religion. I have a lot of Orthodox rabbi friends. And this is basically how we see each other. This is how it works. They go, I see what you're doing as Judaism. It's not how I would do it. It's not how I would teach my students to do it. But what you're doing satisfies God. And I say the same thing back to them. I see your mechitza. I see your monthly mikvah. I see I see all of the things you're doing. I recognize them as Jewish. They're not how I would teach my students, but you have satisfied God as well.
That's wonderful. I think that's wonderful.
Most of us are able to do that. And I even have a good relationship with the Chabad rabbi here, as good a relationship probably as exists in this country between a Reform rabbi and a Chabad rabbi. It helps that I'm me, I think, but in any event.
You're male and you have a beard.
Yeah.
Or Debbie didn't have that.
It's harder when you're a lady to have a beard. Anyway, sorry, I shouldn't. Now that's on the internet now, and I don't care. Okay, moving on. So they recognized each other as Jewish, and that's a very nice. Like, this is the thing. However, not everyone feels that way. Who you side with is kind of a reflection of who you are. Rav Yosef said, one who acts in accordance with the opinion of Beit Shammai has done nothing and must repeat the Shema in accordance with the opinion of Beit Hillel. You guys you're Yotze, you're good. You can go if you'd like. I shouldn't add if you like, because then there's like pressure to be like, oh, should I say? It's good when there's three, then they can go. All right. See you later, guys. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. So this rabbi, Rav Yosef, is like, I don't know about that whole everything they do is kosher bit. It's like one who does the Shema in accordance with Beit Shammai hasn't done the Shema. As we learned in the Mishnah with regard to the halachot of a sukkah, which we'll learn in a different tractate. One who had his head and most of his body in the sukkah, and his head and his table upon which he was eating inside the house, Beit Shammai invalidate his action. as he is liable to be drawn after the table and end up eating outside the sukkah in his house. And Beit Hillel validate his action since his head and most of his body remain inside the sukkah. So this is interesting. What does it appear Rab Yosef is invalidating the actions of someone who follows Beit Shammai?
Because Shammai is excluding Hillel's.
He's invalidating an invalidator. He says, well, Hillel's not an invalidating type guy. We follow him. But if you must follow Shammai, you must be cool with taking that scorched earth type approach to the rabbinate, right? Hillel's is we can all be here, like we just said. We can all be different and together. Shammai's isn't saying that. Shammai never says that, though. He draws lines everywhere. There's a middle here where we can draw lines and be welcoming, which I think a lot of us are trying to do between Hillel and Shammai. But if you're taking just Hillel and just Shammai, Shammai's the guy who's always like, nope, if you just missed it, you missed it. Second place, first loser. That's Shammai's opinion. So Rav Yosef says, fine. You happen to lose this one, though. So everything you say is nothing now because you lost. He played an all or nothing game and lost. What are you left with? Nothing. Beit Hillel said to Beit Shammai as a proof, there was an incident where the elders of Beit Shammai and the elders of Beit Hillel went on Sukkot to visit Rabbi Yochanan ben HaChoronit. They found him with his head and most of his body in the sukkah. So imagine you built a sukkah. Now, it doesn't have to be totally ridiculous. Imagine the sukkah was the exact size of this table. The sukkah goes to like here. My head and most of my body are in the sukkah. But part of me, the sukkah ends here. Part of me is outside the sukkah, but this is inside the sukkah. That's what he's doing. It's not really that crazy, right? If you built a temporary booth, to be like, oh, I'm kind of outside of it. So they found him with his head and most of his body in the sukkah and his table inside the house. And they said nothing to him. In other words, even Beit Shammai didn't object. Beit Shammai rules against it. But the elders of both schools went to visit this special rabbi. And maybe it was deference. We're not told yet why, but Beit Shammai didn't say anything. These are not the guys who don't say anything. Again, doing an action makes it a precedent. This is why we get the joke from if you do it once, it's a new thing. If you do it twice, it's tradition. In Judaism, we're not really kidding. You do something enough times, it's just the way it's done, and nobody's allowed to change it. And so it's important when you let these things slide, you're saying this is okay and allowing more people to do it next time. Beit Shammai said to them, and is there proof from there? Beit Shammai denies that's the reality of events. They say that's the record has been misrepresented. That's not what happened, they say. Rather, they said to him explicitly, if you have been accustomed to act in this manner, you have never in your life fulfilled the mitzvah of Sukkah. Doesn't make him not a Jew, but it's certainly an insulting thing to say to a rabbi. We see that Beit Shammai held that anyone who did not act in accordance with their opinion did not fulfill his obligation at all. They were so all or nothing. Similarly, since Beit Hillel's opinion was accepted as halakha, anyone who acts in accordance with the opinion of Beit Shammai fails to fulfill his obligation.
I don't understand that last sentence. I thought Hillel was inclusive. Yeah.
No, this is the argument. This is the story is meant to say that because Beit Shammai was the guy who said it's either all or nothing, since he lost, since Hillel's opinions were accepted as halakha, according to Shammai's own rules, anyone who acts in accordance with the opinion of Beit Shammai fails to fulfill his obligation, because he says here, you never fulfilled the halakha, the mitzvah of sukkah. What he's saying that you have to follow the halakha. But since the halakha doesn't follow him, he's saying that anytime you do what I told you, you're not doing halakha. So that's what he's saying. Like it's like Beit Hillel is like, it's not my rule. If you had my rule, then we'd all be fine. But like you have your rule, and your rule says that you're wrong because they accepted me and not you. Your rule was predicated on them accepting you and not me. But that's not what happened. So that's the explanation of that. Yeah, I know I read it again. I was like, oh, there's a couple concepts in there that they're not plugging in correctly, but yeah. Okay. Uh-oh. And then Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, who's a real hardliner, stated an even more extreme opinion. One who acted in accordance with the opinion of Beit Shammai has acted so egregiously that he is liable to receive the death penalty. As we learned in our, right, exactly, you go, uh-oh, we went way off the deep end now. Has acted so egregiously that he's liable to receive the death penalty, as we learned in our Mishnah that Rabbi Tarfon said to his colleagues, you remember this, we learned this already. Once I was coming on the road when I stopped and reclined to recite Shema in the accordance of the statement of Beit Shammai. Yet in so doing, I endangered myself due to the highwaymen who rob people on the road. The sages said to him, you deserve to be in a position where you were liable to pay with your life, as you transgressed the statement of Beit Hillel. So he's going to say, the sages, the Hachamim, say, if you transgress Beit Hillel, you pay with your life. Bingo, bango. You follow. So go back to this. If you act in accordance with Beit Shammai, you not only aren't doing that, but you are you are a heretic. If this guy's opinion is not what we accept, but like this is an extreme. They even, Steinsaltz wants you to know this is an extreme opinion that is not accepted. But this is how you could take it. Yeah. Sure.
Isn't the message in a way, if you follow logic, you're going to end up being illogical?
Not necessarily. I think this is beating you over. This is you could think this, but you shouldn't, that the Talmud does a lot of the time. You could think this, but you shouldn't. Because again, who won? Hillel, not Shammai. So all of this Shammaiism is bunk. This is why we reject Shammaiism, even though I love Shammai personally, and I have a very rabbinic close feeling, affinity, thank you, for Shammai. We don't follow Shammai because he was a little extreme. Not as extreme as Nachman Bar Yitzchak, but pretty extreme. Anyway, so Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, okay, well, if according to, if we're doing that, then anyone who follows them should die. Which, yeah. By the way, and then they just end it. That's the end of that sugya. It's over. We're going to a new Mishnah now. So again, the point of it not to take that we end, yes, so yes, you should die if you don't follow. That's not what they don't end it to say that's the end. They end it to say, this is the extremism you could be led to as a follower of Beit Shammai. This is why we do what Beit Hillel says, and we don't try and we try and teach our students not to do what Beit Shammai said. This is why all of this was said, so you would understand why Rabbi Yehuda was such a dick to Ben Azariah, Elazar Ben Azariah. Why was he being so rude to him? Why was he doing that intentionally? Because of this. Because otherwise it could lead to this. And the rabbis don't want that. Don't worry. Nobody who follows Beit Shammai gets put to death. Although they're not doing halakha, so it's like, And if you're not doing halacha in the sense of you're a reformer conservative, then you don't really care what Beit Shammai about his extremism, because you're probably not an extremist in any, you're probably a universalist or something if you're not that familiar. Anyway, any thoughts about this sugya, this story of the Beit Hillel and Shammai and the see the rich things we can come out of talking about the Shema, the nature of extremism and balance in life, important.
And also, and this is my old view of
Sure.
the deep, intense seeking to get God's will correct.
Mm-hmm.
Tremendous piety in that.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely, but the thing is, like, it's piety, and they all are searching for it on their own, in a way. They're doing it together and on their own, because they have their own opinion, and they're going to say it, even if it's not totally in line with something that their teacher taught them. Like this, Nachman Bar Yitzhak had an opinion, and it helps us learn, even though he's a crazy person. We learn to reject extremism from his extremism. Doesn't mean we don't have extremism in the book. Just means we reject it. It's there so we can reject it. A lot of people who are critical of the Talmud have a difficult time understanding why you would have anything in a book that you don't agree with. And those people are fools, because they didn't read it. They don't understand it. They don't understand what a magnificent work this is. I don't know exactly how to refer to it. Divinely inspired, perhaps. Okay. Mishnah. Matni. From the laws of the recitation of Shema itself, the Mishnah proceeds to discuss the blessings recited in conjunction with Shema. This is the order. In the morning, when reciting Shema, one recites two blessings beforehand. The first one, Yotzer Or, and the second, Ahava Rabbah. And one thereafter, which begins Emet V'Yatziv, which is Emet V'Yatziv. And in the evening, one recites two blessings beforehand, Ma'ariv Aravim and yes, thank you, Ahavat Olam. And two thereafter, which is Emet V'Yatziv and Emet V'Emunah, sorry, and Hashkivenu. I'm translating the things that's not, and the blessing help us lie down, but help us lie down is Hashkivenu. With regard to the blessing, Emet Ve'emunah, which I will often read in English at our Friday night services, whether one recites it in its long formula and whether one recites it in its short formula, he fulfills his obligation. So there's, I guess, there's a shorter version that you could do. However, the general principle is where the sages said to recite, thank you, a long blessing, one may not shorten it. Someone know the difference between a long blessing and a short blessing? Okay. To the chalkboard. Oh, hey, it's still my thing from that other time. Goodbye, motion in the chain of transmission. And hello, time. I'm not going to be here long, don't worry. Okay, so, okay. So here what we have is, it's not Okay, so this is a short blessing. It starts Baruch Atah Adonai. It may have another Fatima that also starts Baruch Atah Adonai. Then there's the long blessing, which is Boi Ima. It starts. That's a acrostic. Baruch Atah Adonai Boi Eloheinu Melech Haolam Ima. So it starts Boi Ima. It starts Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. It may continue. The long ones continue. Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, etc. and so forth. And those end always with a at least a Baruch Atah Adonai Chatima. The short ones don't always have a Chatima. A restatement. A Chatima means seal or signature these days. And it's that last line that refreshes. So when we do Ma'ariv Aravim, we do we start Ma'ariv Aravim, and then in the end, what do we say? We say Baruch Atah Adonai Ma'ariv Aravim. Short blessing. When you do Asher Yatzar in the morning, that's also a short blessing. Asher Yatzar et Adam b'chokma v'ravo nekavim nekavim. You go through it, and in the end, Baruch Atah Adonai ufech al basar mafli la'asad. Just got this at the end, the Baruch Atah Adonai. Then you have the longer ones that have the whole thing, like Kiddush. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. We don't need to finish the blessing because we're not saying it for real, but you do that, and then at the end you come back with another blessing, Baruch Atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat, right? So you got the beginning and the end. This is what the rabbis are going to be talking about over the next couple. That's short blessings and long blessings, and you can find out just by applying that rubric to it. Go through the prayer book. If it has the whole thing, then it's a long blessing or a short blessing. So just as we're saying this, some prayers they're saying you could do it in a long form or a short form. Sometimes with the short form, if you're on the road or something, you might just say the Chatima. That might count as the short form of doing it. You'll see sometimes on a Friday night, if you see me do the Amidah, some nights if I'm still standing and everyone's sitting down, I switch to just doing the Chatimot so that I can do the blessing, but also get through it so that I'm not putting a stumbling block before the community by having everyone sit there and watch me pray for time. So here it says, however, the general principle is where the sages said to recite a long blessing, one may not shorten it. And so too, where they said to recite a short blessing, one may not lengthen it. Remember, we don't add or subtract from mitzvot. We don't do the overly harsh thing just because, can we turn on these fans? It's like hella hot in here, isn't it? I got yeah. So now we've got some air going, and that should hopefully get us through the next 10 minutes. So once again, we see we're not just doing things to be pious people in a whole. Some people today like to do that, but you're not supposed to. The rabbis are saying very clearly, if it's supposed to be short, keep it short. If it's supposed to be long, do it long. Where the sages said that a blessing must conclude with a second blessing at the end, you saw me do that, one may not fail to conclude with that blessing. You always have to use the Chatima. Similarly, if the sages said that a blessing must not conclude with a second blessing, one may not repeat oneself. If there isn't a second blessing as part of that blessing, as a Chatima, don't add a second one just so that you can have that. Don't do that. Yeah.
They use the word sages. Is that shorthand for the chain of command?
No, the sages are, when it says the sages, it means the general agreement of the rabbis. So the Chachamim. They're called often Chazal, Chachamim Zichronam Livracha, which is our sages of blessed memory. And they are the ones who wrote rabbinic literature. They are the Stama-itic voice, the general voice of the Talmud. And whenever there's the sages think, it means the overwhelming agreement of rabbis, of the rabbis of the time of the Talmud. We have more modern Chachamim, but we don't have Chazal. Chazal was just that generation, those generations. Okay, so Gemara. The Gemara begins by determining the formula of the two blessings preceding the morning Shema. The Gemara, so it gave us some, and to be fair, Steinsaltz took from the Gemara and put them in there for us. But in the original Aramaic, it just said, well, there's two before and one after, and two after, and two. And the Gemara is like, well, which ones? What prayers are we supposed to say? You didn't tell us. Rabbi Yaakov said in the name of Rabbi Oshaya, the blessing focuses on the verse, Yotzer or Uvorei Choshech. We all know that one, right? Who forms light and creates darkness, from Isaiah. Lema Yotzer or Uvorei Noga. With regard to this formula for the blessing, the Gemara asks, let him say the following. Why doesn't he say, who forms light and creates brightness? Noga. Why does it say, Uvarei Choshech? Who forms light and creates darkness? Doesn't sound as good. Why don't we say, who forms light and creates brightness? The Gemara answers, we say the blessing as the verse is written in the Bible and do not alter the formula that appears in the verse. Why don't we change it? Because that's not what Isaiah said. Isaiah, it was Isaiah 45, it says, Lama'an yad'u mimizrach shemesh uma'arava, so that they may know from east to west that there is none but me. I am God and there is none else. Yotzer or v'orei choshech, osei shalom v'orei ra, ani Adonai osei kol ele.
So why is there a debate when there's a clear source?
What do you mean, why is there a debate? There isn't a debate. They're not really arguing, though. The Gemara isn't arguing here. What the Gemara is doing, it says what blessing, like they're not really arguing. They're arguing so that you won't do the wrong thing. They're saying you might think this way, but you shouldn't. So they're going to they're setting something up to knock it down. They do that all the time, but they don't ever consider that you really would have done it that way. It's not two people. This is not an instance of two people arguing different ways of doing things. This is the voice of the Talmud telling you, don't do it this way. You might think you could do this, but you can't. Right? It's saying you might think with regard to the formula. The Gemara asks, why doesn't it say? It doesn't really mean that, though. It means he shouldn't say. We could have translated lema here as, don't let him say who forms light and creates brightness, because we say the verse as written in the Bible and we don't alter it. Does that make more sense? Like it's not an argument, is what I'm saying. They never intended for you to do it that way. No one should consider. It's a different thing than when Hillel and Shammai are arguing about the right way to do things. This isn't offering two different ways. There's one way, and the other way they're putting up is because you might think about that, and you might think that's a good idea, but they don't think it is.
They're applying a consensus and saying don't do it this way.
Right. They're trying to present the consensus. And you might say, well, why is this? Why should we do it? Why don't we change it to something nice? And they said, because they just want to say to you, all of that came before it here is here just so that they can say this, just so they can say this. They just want to say, we say the blessing as the verse is written in the Bible. Kediktiv ka'amrinam. Because that's the way it's written. It's basically what it says. We say it as it's written. And they really want you to know that. They don't want you to start playing with blessings and trying to mix up the words and then end up mixing up the words of the Torah, because you cannot mix up the words of Torah. That is, you can't add to or subtract from the Torah. So if you're changing Torah, you cannot change the words of the Torah. That's an absolute no. So they really want you to know this, and so they said all that other stuff so that they could get to this. It's just a form of narrative. Yeah.
You can interpret, but interpreting, you're not adding or subtracting.
Yes, that's my belief. Obviously, the way I interpret, Orthodoxium would say, is not always a valid interpretation. Obviously, we have, and even I believe there are many things that are not valid interpretations of Judaism. That's where we argue. That's the whole point of it. But yeah, they and I agree here. By the way, you don't change the Torah for nobody. The Gemara strongly objects. The Gemara will fight with itself just to get points across. But if so, what about the continuation of the verse? This is a good point. I was wondering if any of you were going to notice this. Because I brought up the verse. Right. In the verse, it says, Yotzer or v'rei choshech, osei shalom u'v'rei ra. Is that how we say the verse? How do we say it? Uvorei et hakol, who creates everything, not who creates evil. Ra. So we don't say it exactly. Interesting. So the Gemara says, okay, we say it is written. Sure, that makes sense. What about in the continuation of the verse where it says, Osei shalom uvorei ra, who makes peace and creates evil? Do we say this blessing as it is written in the Tanakh? Ela, rather, ketiv ra, it is written evil, and we euphemistically recite the blessing. All things, we say etakol, which I said. We euphemistically say all things to avoid mentioning evil. Here too, let us euphemistically say brightness instead of darkness. So the first voice is arguing back with the second voice and says, hold on. You said we didn't change anything, and that's why I can't do brightness instead of choshech. I can't do noga instead of choshech. But you changed ra to etakol, so that we could just say God creates everything, which happens to include evil, and not specifically say osei ra, which means creates evil. So he says, if you're being euphemistic, let us be euphemistic. We'll say it's a euphemism. And then the Talmud beat its own head over itself with a cinder block. No. Ela Amarava. Rather, Rava said the reason we recite who creates darkness is in order to mention the attribute of day at night and the attribute of night during the day, and thereby unify day and night as different parts of a single entity. That's really dumb for Rava, but they needed something to knock down. That's not going to stand. Do you think it's going to stand? The reason we say why we can't say uvorei choshech, the reason why we say uvorei choshech and don't say uvorei ra is because of wanting to mention day at night and the night at day. So you're mentioning night during this morning blessing by saying choshech. The Gemara continues and asks. The Gemara goes, okay, Rava, I don't mean to be a jerk, but okay, the attribute of night is mentioned during the day. We say, Yotzer or Uvarei Choshech. But where do you find the attribute of day? I've read over Ma'ariv Aravim and don't talk about day. So what are you talking about, Rava? Right? And so Abaye comes in, and Abaye says, nevertheless, it in fact is. Because in Ma'ariv Aravim, we say, Golel or mibnei choshech, v'choshech mibnei or. Right? We say, who rolls away light before the darkness and darkness before the light. So it does refer to that, Abaye would say. The Gemara will not be satisfied. The Gemara asks, and what is the formula of the other blessing recited before the Shema? Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Ahava Rabbah. And Rabbi Elazar instructed his son, Rabbi Padat, to also say Ahava Rabbah. That was also taught in a Baraita. One does not recite Ahavat Olam, rather one recites Ahava Rabbah. And the rabbis say that one recites Ahava Rabbah, and so it says Ahava Rabbah Avtanu. Oh no, sorry, that's our version. Ve'avat Olam Ahavticha ve'al Alkain Mishoch Tich Chasad. Like it says in Jeremiah, and in eternal love I have loved you, therefore I have drawn you with kindness. The blessing in abounding love, Ahava Rabbah, is about God's love for us and includes praise for his giving us the Torah. Therefore, Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said, one who arose to study until he recites Shema, he must recite a special blessing over the Torah. If he has already recited Shema, he need not recite that blessing, as he has exempted himself by reciting the blessing of Ahava Rabbah, which includes the components of the blessing over the Torah. And now the Gemara is going to go on to something else, so I'm going to let you go now. I'm going to thank anyone